Welcome and thank you everyone for joining us today for Powder River Basin Resource Council's webinar series, Reclaiming and Growing Wyoming's Future. This webinar's topic is Tools for Tough Times During Wyoming's Energy Transition. Our presenters today will focus on the resources available to support the physical, mental, and financial well-being of families in transition. Today's event is hosted by the Powder River Basin Resource Council. We're a member-based grassroots nonprofit founded in 1973. Our organization is a family agriculture and conservation organization based in Wyoming. Our members are concerned citizens committed to conservation of our unique land, mineral, water, and clean air resources, consistent with responsible use of those resources to sustain the livelihood of present and future generations. If you want to know more about our organization, please visit our website at powderriverbasin.org. We have 3 speakers today who represent different perspectives for building family resiliency during times of economic transition, and we're thrilled to have them all today. Each of them will speak, then we'll take a short break, and we'll begin a question and answer session. Some questions have been submitted ahead of time when you registered, and we will also take questions during the webinar prior to the break. Please enter any questions you have in the question box in the GoToWebinar panel on the right side of the screen. We ask that once the speakers begin, that the chat remains quiet, respectful, and only related to the content of the webinar. Due to time constraints, we may not get to all of the questions, but we will make contact information available to encourage an ongoing conversation. And I'm sure any of the panelists would be more than willing to have that conversation with you later on. I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator for today's topic, Dr. Kathy Connolly. Representative Connolly serves in the Wyoming House of Representatives as the Minority Floor Leader, and she is a member of the Labor, Health, and Social Services Committee, as well as the Department of Family Services Advisory Council and the State Workforce Investment Board, among many other distinguished roles. Representing the state's 13th district in Albany County, Dr. Connolly is also a tenured professor at the University of Wyoming in Laramie. Representative Connolly cares deeply about the future of our state, and I know she thinks a lot about how best to support workers and provide needed community services to families and communities. And at this point, I'm very excited to turn things over to Representative Connolly.
Thanks, Shannon, and thank you to the Powder River Basin Council for having this series of really important webinars and conversations over the summer. Before we get started, for me, Wyoming's economic dependence on fossil fuels has meant that energy transition impacts the entire state. By supporting families, we can transition to a more sustainable economy. But for me, that transition is not simply about economic development and paying attention to things like broadband, which I of course think are incredibly important. But it's also about investment in infrastructure that includes investment in childcare, investment in after-school programs, investment in aging support, investment in our communities. This would also help remove some of the burden from individual workers. It's not all about individual choices. It's about our communities. So today, our speakers that the PRBC has set up will discuss some of Wyoming's current services and identify opportunities and possible solutions for moving forward as communities. And when we get to the question and answer period, that's where we'd really like to hear what your thoughts are. The goal for this webinar series is to start a deeper ongoing conversation about the needs of Wyoming's families, as well as to provide education, tools, and resources for families in economic transition. Our first speaker is Lynne Huskinson. Lynn, wave to everyone.
I wish I could. Okay.
All right. Lynn is a former Campbell County miner who'll discuss her personal experience dealing with the forced transition from coal mining. She and her co-workers were laid off without notice when Black Jewel filed for bankruptcy, and her community of Gillette is still significantly impacted. She'll be speaking about the lessons learned from the realities of tough times, as well as some of the proactive steps working families and communities can take to prepare themselves for their future. So Lynn, each of the speakers will have 15 minutes. And so Lynn, it's all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I can't see my screen anymore, so hopefully do you all see me? Great. Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to thank everybody for signing up and for participating today. And I also like to thank my fellow presenters, and especially what a privilege it is to have Kathy Connolly here today. It's an honor to be in your company. Thank you. And I'd really like to thank the Powder River Basin Resource Council, Shannon, Michelle, and Robin. Thank you for allowing me to share my experience and believing that I had a story to tell. I've done a little bit of press, and it's awesome to hear that Wyoming and the PRBRC is interested in your story and wants you to share it. I visited, in preparation for this presentation, I visited with several neighbors, friends affected by the fossil fuel industry. I'm surrounded by fossil fuel workers in my neighborhood. So I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of the energy transition that's happening in Campbell County and how it affects Gillette. I believe most people in Gillette are aware of that we're in an energy transition. It's just the disconnect of what we're going to do about it. The legislature the majority seems to have a handful of bills that are meant to save coal, save power plants, maybe give money for lawsuits. And I gave testimony in a joint minerals meeting a while back about the different bills and just how I didn't understand them, and if I could have somebody like explain why we're going down this route instead of just transition. I did run for office, House District 32, House of Representatives, and my whole campaign platform was just transition, workers' rights, worker protection, how to get rid of the right to work rule, stuff like that. Anyway, when I testified with Joint Minerals, Chairman Greer assured me that they were looking at an energy transition bill, and I don't believe that went anywhere. It was more like a study, and I don't believe we have time to study anymore. We know what's happening. It's happening right now, and we need to move more quickly. And work at engaging our community to find different revenue to replace the huge loss of the mineral revenue. As far as firsthand knowledge of energy transition, I would say 20 to 30% of your production should be a warning sign and a glaring sign of transition. I visited with my coworkers, my old coworkers at ESM, and they see all the warning signs of what happened with Black Jewel. The Eagle Butte mine has changed. They're at half of their crew when I was working 2 years ago. Like I said, they're worried about the similar situation they're in. I can relate a story when we were in the last days of Black Jewel. They have a thing called shrinking your inventory, and when you shrink your coal, if you put a bunch of heavy equipment in a small area and you have to all work in this really tight area. And one of the things I observed was situation where a guy was cleaning coal with a front end loader and he was too close to the edge. He fell off the edge, and my buddy caught him in a bucket. His shovel, otherwise he would have fell 50 to 60 feet. And situations like that just not only are energy workers dealing with the fact that their job could go away, but when you compound it with situations like that, it gets ugly. And plus their sales, they're all over the basin. Contracts are shrinking. Power plants are taking less coal. So definitely have an awareness of the energy transition and what's happening in Gillette. I'd like to share a little bit. I have worked with the Salvation Army and Council of Community Services. Soup Kitchen, numbers are up. Soup Kitchen does fluctuate. COVID, all of this has been pretty weird, but they use a weird gauge, the Salvation Army does, as far as like boxes of food that are being distributed right now in Campbell County. And pre-Black Jewel bankruptcy was like 100 boxes of food. And as it is right now, post-bankruptcy, because I just find it odd that they use that. I mean, it's not odd, but Black Jewel had a big effect on Gillette. Now they're at 2,000 boxes of food and serving over 1,400 families, and anywhere like blessings in a backpack, all of that. There's definitely job loss and food insecurity, house insecurity in Gillette. For you know, a county that's flourished with mineral wealth, it's tough. It doesn't seem to stop growing, the need. So rather than dwell on that, I'm gonna go right into my experience at Black Jewel. I'd like to kind of like share exactly what happened. I was working 4 nights, and it was a pay period. I Black Jewel and Jeff Hoops had missed their pay period. And so when I got to work, we were given the opportunity to go home or work. They said it wouldn't be held against you. You could go home without pay. As an old timer, I heard it'll be held against you just because I knew how management was. Saturday, the illustrious Jeff Hoops got on his jet plane and flew out payroll for the Bel Air and Eagle Butte mine. And the only reasoning that I can think of that he did that was because Eagle Butte and Bel Air was his moneymakers. Sunday was a fairly normal shift, but by morning they had told us we all had to go upstairs for an emergency meeting, which is never good, especially in the middle of a 4-night weekend block. I was late to the meeting, but I had the gist of the meeting was we were going to try bankruptcy, try to work through bankruptcy. And I had a senior manager come over to me and say, this bankruptcy deal, it's a good thing. We 2 days ago, they were about to shut the doors. So that told me that management knew a lot more than we did, obviously. About 6 hours later, I had a friend that was working on a day shift. They were told to park their equipment and go upstairs for another meeting. And that's when they were told that they didn't have the money to run. And they were gonna shut the doors and block the gates. And I was on a vacation day, so about 5 o'clock, my supervisor sent me a voicemail. He said, unfortunately, the bankruptcy failed. They were trying to put a package together. They had shut the gates, and they didn't think, they didn't know. We were all unemployed. So that was kind of harsh. I mean, he was a nice guy. He tried to be gentle about it, but that's where the Wyoming Department of Workforce Services stepped in. And I watched the previous webinar with Robin Cooley, and when she said it was a profound event, it's like it was unprecedented. It hurt our community, and one of the big kickers was that they locked the gates and people weren't able to get their equipment, like tools for mechanics and stuff. And I just thought it was ironic that they called the sheriff department to guard the gate like Pinkerton and guard a private business who had just shut out all of their employees. It just was amazing. So when the Wyoming Department of Wyoming Workforce stepped in, they literally saved Black Jewel's bacon, because Black Jewel as a company really didn't do anything. I was told by HR that they couldn't afford a stamp to send you any information. Just pretty callous, didn't use good messaging. And I guess my point is that without the Wyoming Department of Workforce Services and the state stepping in, it would have been a lot worse. Some of the tools that I used to get through this sudden layoff was I had collected a pension because I'd worked for 7 different coal mines. I started in 1979, so luckily somebody grabbed me by the collar and said, "You better get signed up for your pension." I think it was 10 years into my career before I did that, but thankfully I'd been stuffing that money in my savings, so I was in a different position than a lot of people that were. Some people said they didn't have $10 to make it home. Some people, unfortunately, were very ill prepared. Another thing with what I did with working for so many different companies, I had a substantial 401k, and I did not roll it over into Black Jewel because I'd been warned, probably through reading and fellow employees, it was Jeff Hoops wasn't a good character. And so I did not get my 401k frozen like other people did, because I think a lot of employees were banking that they could tap into their 401k and at least make some bills. And that was the thing about the pay period too. Missing that many pay periods, that really just there's people that were catching up because they got caught in automatic payments and all of that. So I guess my story to minors when I talk to them is I tell them that, please save your money, get prepared, look for other jobs, have a cushion, because it definitely, I don't know if anybody read Dustin Blysefer's report this morning from Wildfire. It's happening. It's black and white. You can see the numbers, and we need to prepare ourselves and our community and get together for a just transition. I'm so thankful that Hollis is here today. The basin is going through so many changes. We can't forget about our mental health. We definitely need to tap into that, and I just hope we can through this transition. My biggest thing for running for office was, people. I feel I guess I almost feel bad that I was prepared and they were not, and I just want to share any kind of information I can to help them. And that's my story. I'll surely answer any questions and give out my email, and hopefully touch base with anybody that wants to work towards a just transition. We need to get that Biden bucks and start moving and take the money that's available. Quit being proud. We need this money. We need to go now. And thank you, Hollis. I'm going to hand off the baton to you.
Thanks, Lynn. Kathy, I think you're muted.
Oh, I am so sorry. You'd think I'd have it down at this point. I was just saying, thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Actually, there are times that it brought tears to my eyes. I'm just thinking about Gillette in general, that 100 to 2,000 boxes of food in one community, in a community that we think of honestly as one of the most well-to-do communities in our state. That figure is sobering. There's no two ways about it. And then your own story of what actually happened, and to try to put ourselves in that place of going to work, right? You just show up for work, right? You just do, you do your, as you did the week before, the week before that, the month before that, the year before that. And then all of a sudden, you no longer have that work over 4 incredible, stressful days, and then months of thinking that things might change, and they didn't. And then what's next? What's next for you and your family? And my goodness, the fact that you feel guilty over the fact that you had saved, I mean, my goodness, what an awful way to think about it. And to me, I mean, you talked about a personal story, and it is very personal, but it isn't, honestly. Your neighbors, your friends, our neighbors are experiencing the same kinds of things, making it impact all of us. And I don't want it to be private. And thank you so much for sharing, because by doing so, you make it so clear to me that it is not just yours, but it is ours. And that being said, we now have a psychologist, as opposed to me like just blabbering all over the place. We have a psychologist who's going to be next and speak, and that is Dr. Hollis Hackman. Hollis waves so everybody knows it's you. All right, that's Hollis. So Hollis received his PhD from the University of Nebraska in 1984, the same year that he moved to Wyoming. He went on for a 35-year-old career with the VA, working primarily with veterans suffering from PTSD. He's been an advocacy coordinator for the Wyoming Psychological Association since 2005. And we've seen him at the legislature for all the years that I've been there. He actively pursues legislation to benefit people with mental disorders and speaks eloquently on those subjects. Dr. Hackman will review the most recent Stress in America survey by the American Psychological Association, which includes information related to the pandemic. He'll also talk about the importance of managing stress for better mental health, including some stress management techniques for job loss and for economic transition. So Dr. Hackman, it's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Minority Floor Leader. Those are very kind words, and I'm not sure they're all that well deserved, but thank you so much. So hi everybody, Hollis Hackman. I'm a psychologist. I am mostly retired at this point. I stopped seeing folks here just about a couple years ago, and pretty much my full-time activity is working on policy issues with the state, in particular suicide intervention techniques and strategies and things that we need to pay attention to in the state, mental health of everybody in the state. So I'm just going to talk today briefly about stress management sorts of things and what we know about stress. And I'll try not to get too deep into the weeds with all that. I'm going to just try to speak in general terms. Most of the stuff I'm going to be talking about, I don't have any PowerPoints or slides available for you. But the American Psychological Association, if you just go to their website and on a search, just type in stress in America, you can get all kinds of, you'll see everything I'm talking about. So the APA has been conducting these surveys for at least 10 years, and there's a lot of useful information. But just to speak about some of the things locally and in our state, there's been a lot of stress in Wyoming recently with this economic downturn, and it's affected counties, Campbell County in a huge way. My brother lives over there, and and kind of has experienced firsthand his neighbors losing their jobs and that sort of thing. These increased numbers of people going to food banks and things like that that Lynn's talking about. We're seeing that in Sheridan County too. We've had mine closures just over the border here in Montana recently. We've had other businesses in town close as a result of the economic downturn. So I'm not sure any county in the state has been unaffected by this, but certainly in the northeast corner of the state, and well, obviously around Kemmer and that part of the state, I mean, it's a statewide kind of a problem. And with that economic downturn comes the reduced revenue streams. And that's problematic for folks, because when the state starts to cut back its services and starts to cut back its support of our public education, for example, that winds up in meaning that people in educational institutions, including our only four-year university in the state, are all facing these cutbacks, and people are facing job loss. And those are real significant stressors. And on top of all that, we have this pandemic this last year. So what we know about stress is that increased levels of stress tend to make mental disorders worse, in particular anxiety disorders, affective disorders or depression, substance use disorders. Generally speaking, depending on what study you want to reference, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 people already have a diagnosable mental disorder. I mean, mental disorders are not that unusual, and they're more common than people think. Sadly, there's a lot of stigma about them, so they don't get talked about very much. But those levels of disorders exist in our population anyway. And then to put on top of that job loss and economic downturn and pandemic, it just makes everything worse. So we do know that increased levels of stressors in a person's environment can have an impact on them, such that if they've got an underlying mental disorder that's maybe fairly well stabilized, when you throw a whole bunch of stress on top of that, often that mental disorder can flower, and then it can meet diagnostic criteria. So it makes things worse. So anyway, given all the stressors that we've got in the state, if you couple that with our very rural nature, you know, we're all kind of separated from each other. And you hear people talk about Wyoming as being one city with really long streets, but it's a long way between folks in our state. So that creates a certain amount of problem when, you know, being connected with people is one of the things that can help protect you against problems with a mental disorder. But that, in addition to there's the stigma that we have in the state about mental health, which is unfortunate, means that people are hesitant to talk about thoughts that they might be having, in particular thoughts about harming themselves. So it might not be a surprise to folks that currently we have the highest suicide rate in the nation. And we've been in that position before, but as long as I've been in the state, certainly as long as I've been doing advocacy work with the legislature, we've been in the top 5, but we're back up to number 1. Now there's a 2-year lag on that data, so it isn't a real-time snapshot, and my concern is, well, it's just going to get worse the way that we're going. So those are just some general comments about stress. As I mentioned earlier, my parent organization, American Psychological Association, has been doing surveys of stress in America, and they've been doing that for several years. And so the most recent survey was completed just this last February. And here's some of the key survey findings. And so this is national data, folks, but you can just kind of take this data, and it's pretty safe to assume you could just add to the frequency if you're just talking about Wyoming, because we've got these additional stressors going on. So some of the key survey findings in this last year include that A majority of adults, that's 61% of the folks that responded to this survey, reported experiencing undesired weight changes since the start of this pandemic. So 2 in 5 folks are saying they gained more weight than they intended. And of that group, adults reported gaining an average of 29 extra pounds, with a typical gain of about 15 pounds. And that might not sound like much, but as you'll see, you start looking at these things and it impacts a person's physical health. And one of the take homes that we like to talk about in the mental health field is you can't separate the body from the mind. There's a connection there. And so if your body starts to suffer, it can impact your mental health. And it goes the other way around too. If your mental health is suffering, and you're endeavoring to help yourself feel better, maybe you do that by overeating or over drinking or other things that are typically not very good for you. But anyway, another major finding is that 2 in 3 Americans, that's 67%, say that they're sleeping more or they're sleeping less than they wanted to since the pandemic started. And that's not a good thing either. If you don't get enough sleep, your body doesn't function as well as you would want it to, and that can just have this additive effect of increasing problems in other areas. So oftentimes, this is a diagnostic indicator for problems with depression. If people are gaining weight, that's a potential indication of problems with depression. It goes the other way too. If you don't have an appetite, often that can be due to depression. And if you lose a significant amount of weight, that can be problematic for your general well-being. Another finding, nearly half of Americans, 47% in fact, said that they delayed or they canceled healthcare services since the pandemic started. Well, if you add on top of that, the folks that get laid off from these mine jobs, if they don't have health insurance, and sadly, I can't keep from mentioning this, Kathy, we have 24,000 something folks in our state that don't have health care insurance. We're just adding the numbers of people to that category when our miners are laid off and other people are losing their jobs. So there's a problem with having access to health care, and if you've delayed health care anyway because of the pandemic, then that can lead to problems. So we're seeing situations where, and y'all are seeing this on the news, there have been an increase in the numbers of cancers that people are experiencing, or they're at a higher level than they would have been because they didn't go get checked out, either because they don't have health insurance, because in our state we didn't expand Medicaid, or they're a laid off miner. So it could be related to that, or they had fears about going into the hospital or the medical center because of the pandemic. Another finding, essential workers, pardon me, were most likely to, or were twice as likely as those who are, well, let me restate that. Essential workers were more than twice as likely as those who were not to have received treatment for from a mental health professional. So our essential workers, our frontline folks, are experiencing some negative mental reactions to our current circumstance. Another finding, our Gen Z adults, or 46% of them, were the most likely generation to say that their mental health has worsened. And that's followed by the Xers, and that's 33% of them. The millennials, that's 31% of them. The boomers, that's my group, that's 28%, and older adults. So if you're curious about that, Generation Z adults, those are the young folks, 18 to 24. Millennials are aged 25 to 42. Xers are 43 to 56. Boomers are 57 to 75, and older adults are 76 and up. So kind of interesting information. So So that's some of the major findings from this survey. I wanted to mention that there are a lot of effects on the body that I haven't gone into. There's a really, at this website I was talking about earlier, there's about a 4-page handout on the stress effects on the body. And again, I was mentioning this earlier, but stress can have a real negative impact on your physical well-being as well as your mental health. So, which leads to a question about solutions. I haven't really practiced my presentation here, so if I'm going over, please shut me off. But potential solutions, let's talk about that a little bit. First, I would just mention that people are different in terms of how they perceive stress. The respondents in this stress survey fell on a category or a continuum, if you will, with high stress being an 8, 9, or a 10, and lower stress being lower than that. But people perceive situations differently, and so there is variability in how you view stress. And so that's something important to remember. And another important thing is you can change how you view stress, and there are things that you can do to manage it. So some of those things start with, well, our general recommendation is to focus on things that you can actually control. So for example, if your mind is focused on things that are out of your control, like is the mind going to close or not, then that can create a lot of anxiety. Or if you're focused on how you're going to pay your bills, that can create a lot of anxiety. And you may have some control over that, but as Lynn pointed out earlier, if you go to your employer and they've just blocked the gates and all of a sudden you don't have any cash flow, then that's going to be stressful. How could it not be? And if you focus on that, that's going to create anxiety, maybe depressive reactions. So when we talk about stress management, we talk about things that you actually have control over. So some of the things you can do to manage stress effectively include maintaining a healthy social support network. And that's tough in a time of a pandemic, but staying connected with people on Facebook, through other social media kind of formats, through email. I mean, anything you can do to stay connected with people, especially people that are a positive kind of a support for you, that's going to be important. And you're going to have a fair amount of control over that. I mean, you can make a decision not to reach out to people and just stay alone. But that could be very problematic in terms of your mental health. So reaching out, staying connected with people is very important. Another thing you've probably got quite a bit of control over is exercising regularly. There's just a ton of studies on this, folks. And one of the famous ones that was done years ago, they took a group of folks and started them on an antidepressant and followed them for 90 days. They took an equivalent group of folks and got them on a regular exercise routine and followed them for 90 days. And what they found at the end of that was the people that were on the exercise regimen did as good as the people that were on the antidepressant. And furthermore, those gains were maintained over a much longer period of time than, I mean, if you're on an antidepressant, if you decide to stop taking it, which we would never recommend without working with your provider or your prescriber, but there's generally what we call a rebound effect. So there can be more depression when you quit taking the medication. But if you got yourself into a regular exercise routine and you stick with it, then those positive effects don't really go away. So regular exercise, we talked about sleep earlier, but you want to make sure you get an adequate amount of sleep. If you start running short on sleep, most adults, it's 7 to 8 hours. And if you're getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, we're going to predict problems with your mental health because it's not good for your body. It's not good for your mind. And then another thing I wanted to mention that has to do with relaxation and doing whatever you can to relax. There's a lot of literature out there available on what's called mindfulness meditation. There's a lot of different ways to meditate. One of my favorite books on meditation is by a provider by the name of John Kabat-Zinn. He's written several books on meditation, and one of the easiest ones to read is titled "Wherever You Go, There You Are." But spending time each day meditating or relaxing can be very helpful. And since I'm on that topic, I would just mention that the person that was going to do my part of the presentation was going to talk about the effects of mountain biking and getting out into nature. And I would just draw your attention to there's an article in the Monitor on psychology. It's volume 51, number 3, and the title of the article is "Nurtured by Nature." So I can't see my screen very well, but the takeaway from all this is that if you get out and walk in nature, get yourself exposed to nature, green spaces or even blue spaces, it can have a very positive effect on your mental health. And this is one of my favorite ways to relax, is to go for a walk out in the beautiful Bighorns here, or there's all kinds of opportunities in our state, and that can be very beneficial. So having said all that,
Hollis, you've got about 1 more minute.
well, I was just wrapping up. I thank you so much for the sign. I was just gonna say that there are things you can do. If you can focus on the things you have control over, you're going to feel better and you're going to have positive outcomes. If you let your mind focus on stuff you don't have control over, that's negative, things are not going to get better. They're probably going to get worse. So I think that's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Hollis, Dr. Hackman, thank you very much. And it was really interesting to hear Lynn's story and her experiences, then for you to talk as a psychologist and the kind of recognition of what is going on throughout the entire country that is even more exacerbated here in Wyoming. And then I kind of love, and I think we all do, with the ending of something that can be very specific for us, which is our beautiful outdoors, and to not take that for granted when it comes to kind of maintaining our mental health. So our last speaker kind of moves from kind of the personal, like what can you do personally for that Dr. Hackman talked about, to what we as a state can and are doing through our Department of Family Services. And our last speaker is Clint Haynes, who is the Ombudsman Public Information Officer for the Wyoming Department of Family Services. He's been with DFS for 18 years and therefore has seen a lot. He served as the statewide training coordinator as well as the district manager for Laramie and my home county, Albany County. He received his undergraduate degree in business education from the University of Wyoming and an MSW from Colorado State University. He'll discuss the department's basket of goods, including an overview of the agency's child and adult protective services, and hopefully dispel a few myths about those programs. He'll also talk about the various supportive programs, including the relatively new Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So Clint, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you to the Powder River Basin Resource Council for putting this panel together. Thank my fellow panelists for being here, and of course, Representative Connolly for moderating this. Appreciate the opportunity to present today and share a little bit more about what the Department of Family Services does. Sharing my screen hopefully right now to show a little bit, or to show what our website looks like, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute. But before I do that, I want to share kind of the principle that Department of Family Services is guided by. We have 3 core values that we choose to operate. First is that it's safe at home, that all children and adults deserve to live and be safe in their own homes. The second value is opportunities for success. All families deserve a fair chance at success, and it's our job to promote family strengths and to provide access to supports and allow families to safely stay together. And the third value that we have is supporting the people who support the families. Our greatest resources are those people who serve families directly in their communities. That's our staff, and that's our partners out there. 88% of Department of Family Service positions are directly providing services in your communities. So with that focus, I want to mention briefly a new kind of viewpoint of why home matters. Why Home Matters is a system-wide vision to promote prevention-oriented child and family well-being system. It looks at really trying to empower families to travel a path that's self-sustaining. It focuses on engaging families in a wide variety of settings along the prevention continuum to keep families safe at home and promote opportunities for success. These engagements really fall into three categories. The first one is primary prevention, and that's really focusing on community-based services and how people can access those services within their community. Second is secondary prevention. That's more targeted in community-based services and supports. So targeting those areas of supports within communities and families. And finally, the third one is our tertiary prevention, and that's the out-of-home and court-ordered services. And unfortunately, that tends to be what folks think of when they think of the Department of Family Services. And people often think that the child welfare system begins when a child is removed from their home, excuse me, in court-ordered or out-of-home placements. And that's not necessarily true. Many at-risk families identified by communities don't need that out-of-home placement or removal of a child from their homes. Rather, they need community-based, targeted services to remain safely in their home. So why Home Matters emphasizes early intervention, community-supported services, and frontline interventions whenever possible. Coming up in the near future, you're going to see more about why Home Matters. You'll hear more, and there'll be a website that will be up and running regarding why Home Matters. The next thing I'd like to do is just to talk a little bit about our child protective services and adult protective services, and possibly dispel a couple myths that are out there regarding those two. First is child protection services. One thing that many people don't quite understand is that the Department of Family Services cannot remove a child from their home. So the only people that are able to do that are law enforcement, medical folks like doctors, and then of course the courts can order that or maintain a child in out-of-home placement. The Department of Family Services cannot remove children from the home. What happens typically when children are removed is that law enforcement will oftentimes be called out to a home for an unsafe setting. If law enforcement at that point determines that the child is in imminent danger, they can take what's called protective custody, and that's the removal of the child from the home. At that point, law enforcement will give physical custody to the state of Wyoming or the Department of Family Services. And at that point, the Department of Family Services worker will try to find a suitable, healthy, and safe placement for that child, looking at their natural supports, natural homes, things like that. All child protection cases have what's called a multidisciplinary team involved. A multidisciplinary team includes the county or district attorney's office, of course, the Department of Family Services, the family, any attorneys that are involved with the family, involved mental health practitioners who are supporting the family, schools. So that team is really there to develop a support system for the family. And the team then makes recommendations on the next course or what should happen within that family. The MDT provides recommendations to the court. And at that point, the judge will make any rulings that are needed within that case. So just a couple different things about child protection. Adult protection, one of the big myths there is that the Department of Family Services cannot take custody or cannot remove an adult from their home. Adults are adults, make up their own mind and are capable to make decisions for themselves. Sometimes those decisions aren't necessarily what we think would be good, but if an adult is capable of making their own decisions, sometimes we have to let them make decisions that we think maybe aren't the best, but we cannot take custody of them or remove them from their home. We typically provide more of a case management type of service. So with that, hopefully that dispels a couple myths that are present out there about the Department of Family Services. I always like to share that. Well, let's look at some of the assistance programs that the department has. In listening to Lynn and Hollis, it's a difficult time whenever the mining industry experiences these types of incidents. Lots of people are really looking for support. Mental health is definitely one of the issues that tends to struggle, but it's also an issue that the Department of Family Services can help in. And a lot of people don't know particularly the services that we have, or are they really aware of how to find them? So that's what I'm going to focus a little bit more on right now. So you should be seeing our website. With that, you'll see a scroller that goes across and highlights different information that's about the agency. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the assistance program and click on it, and it opens up the cadre of different services that are provided by the Department of Family Services. I'm going to look at these briefly and kind of describe a little bit about them so you're familiar with them. As I mentioned, the Why Home Matters, the important piece of this is to get information out about what our agency offers, how to get people hooked up with those programs and get the assistance that they need. So it's what's important. So looking at food assistance will be our first one. So SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, is a program that a lot of people also are familiar with. It is our old food stamp program, and it provides funding for nutritional foods in the form of an EBT, or an electronic benefits transfer card, so like a debit card. The applications are on our website, so you'll see that they're here. They're in English and in Spanish. It does have some qualifications, looks at income limits. Just to kind of mention income limits, it's based on the size of the family. For a family of 4, the maximum gross monthly income is about 130% of the federal poverty level, which is about $2,839 per month, which is not a lot. We recognize this. Unfortunately, it is a federal program, and we're bound by those federal guidelines of administering the program. More information about how to apply. One of the things that's important is that if you do have any questions about any of these programs, I'm certainly available to answer those, and I encourage folks to go to their local office and have those communications there on a local level. So our SNAP benefits. Next program to talk about briefly is our SNAP education. This is also a program that's based on income, but it's a program that helps families look at how to purchase responsibly and how to prepare meals responsibly. So I know oftentimes we have meals where we make too much and we end up throwing it away. This really looks at buying products that you can cook once, have a meal, and then reuse those products to continue to have meals further down the week. Emergency food commodity programs. These are the programs that if you need food right away. The TFAP is a emergency food assistance program, again, based on income. For a 4-family home, max income is a little bit over $34,000. It does have a listing of different TFAP agency, so you can go there and see what services are available or where you can get those commodities. The other service is the Commodity Supplemental Food Service Program. Again, it's income-based. The income guidelines are listed there. And the agency works with the Food Bank of Wyoming to administer those programs and be able to make those commodities available. Now looking at some of our housing assistance. So this is where one of our newest programs is. It's the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP. So ERAP, we have as a state $180 million available to provide direct services to people in the communities. There are some eligibility requirements. Those are that you must be a renter. Unfortunately, at this point, it does not apply to homeowners. Your household income is less than 80% of the area mean income. So that area mean is the point where half of the community is above, half the community is below that income limit. You have to qualify for unemployment benefits or show a financial loss due to COVID-19, and that you may be at risk of experiencing homelessness or of housing instability. So the program does provide rental and supplemental utility payments. It can go back to any kind of rental if you haven't been able to pay rent as of March 13th of 2020, when COVID hit Wyoming and there's the emergency was noted. We can start paying rent up to that point, as well as utilities. And then also going forward, if you are in jeopardy of having housing instability, it can go forward up to 3 months at a time. It's a program that the Department of Family Services has worked in coordination with Workforce Services to get this program out and to advertise and get as many people as possible to know about it and be able to apply for it. Eligible utility costs are electricity, fuel costs, so oil, propane, water and sewer, and internet services up to $50 a month. Things that are not covered, mortgage payments, as I mentioned, hopefully something with mortgages will be coming from the federal government. Maintenance costs, home security, landscaping, things like that are not covered as well. Want to show the income guidelines real quick so people know. This is a great frequently asked questions portion of the website. It has it for renters and for landlords. So if you're a landlord, that's very helpful. Here are the main amounts. So if you're interested, please go there. It's listed by county and also by the number of people that are in your household. So a great tool there. The next program, just to touch base on, is LEAP, which is our Low Income Energy Assistance Program. Also is an income guided program that can help pay for heating costs during the winter in Wyoming. As we know, in Wyoming, it can be extremely cold and somewhat unbearable. Part of the things that some of us love about Wyoming, but the cost of heating your living space can be expensive. So LEAP is there to provide assistance in cost used for heating your home. It is open just for winter months, so November through May. Applications, you can apply here online and also or download the application, and then you can submit it electronically, or you can mail it, multiple options there. The Weatherization Program is another program that not many people know about. Another great opportunity to help it kind of weatherize your home so that it does provide, if you have leaky windows, if you qualify, you can have someone come in, do an assessment on your home. They can help seal your windows. They can help look at your heater to see if it's running effectively. So lots of different options that are available through our weatherization program. Applications are there as well, so you know that's there. And then I think we have a last program I really want to touch on quickly is their telephone assistance line. It's Lifeline. It is not Life Alert. You may be familiar with those commercials, but it is not Life Alert. It is something that will help pay up to, I believe, just under $10, like $9.25 to assist in payment of either telephone services or internet expenses, one of the two, but not both. It is an income guided program as well, and information is on there that describes how you can qualify. If you receive SNAP, if you receive Medicaid, supplemental security income, any of those things, you are also qualified for a telephone assistance line and can apply. I guess the last program that I want to mention, which is more of a, it's, I don't know, not a difficult program, but is somewhat of a difficult program to administer, is our POWER program. It is a program that we run with the with Workforce Services, and it does pay some cash benefits to folks that qualify. They have to be working towards a job, self-sufficiency, things like that. It's limited in time as well, so it's limited to 60 months in that program. You do work with the case manager from the Department of Families, or excuse me, Workforce Services, which is another wonderful collaboration between agencies, and can be a great support for folks. So with that, I encourage folks to go to our Department of Family Services website. There's a tremendous amount of information. I also encourage folks to go to the Department of Family Services Facebook page, which is Department of Family Services. Great information on there as well. And we try to update the community with new information that we learn about, try to share it as much as possible. So with that, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And Representative Connolly.
All right, thank you so much, Clint. A tremendous amount of information about what DFS does. Also know that in virtually every community, there is a DFS office. It's not simply an entity that operates outside of Cheyenne, but typically every county will have an office, and folks can even drop by, right, and talk to someone, as well as call or send emails. All right, with that being said, we're going to take about a 5-minute break. But before you panelists go away, the 5-minute break is for you to take a sip of water, for folks to send in their final questions. But I'm going to give you a question to think about during the break. All right, and it's based on a phrase that Lynn used in her presentation, which was, I think, Lynn, you said something along the lines of, it's time for a just transition. It just is. And that I want Lynn and Hollis for you to think about, what would that just transition look like in your mind, right? And then Clint, you're going to have the hard part for that question, because I want you to think about, how can DFS, and you can even do other state agencies if you'd like, how can they implement the vision that Hollis and Lynn put out there for you? Okay, so let's think about that just transition. And we will be back at, let's say it's 12:36 now, a little bit after 12:40, between 12:40 and 12:45. So see everybody back in a few minutes.
Yeah, and just a reminder to the panelists, feel free to turn off your webcam and mute yourself on the break if you need to step away. Thanks.
Folks, we'll get started as soon as we have all of the panelists back. Here's Lynn and Clint. All right, so I gave Lynn and Hollis some homework to do over the break. And so let's start with Lynn. Lynn, could you explain first to our listeners, what do you mean? What is meant by a just transition? And then what do you envision? Oops, we're not hearing you. And no, and I have no powers. Shannon, are you out there? Oops.
Can you hear me now? Oh boy.
Lynn, I
Lynn,
think
we can hear you.
Can you?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
What does a just transition mean to me? Is we bring our community together, and it means the whole community, government, city, county, companies. Just transition means transparency, really, to me. Is like, instead of hiding where our how we can build revenue, or what's actually happening. I guess just transition means to me that we just have to come together and we have to talk to everybody, not just coal miners or energy workers. It's like our whole community. It's just, it's all of us. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
God, that's such an interesting point. Sometimes in other states talk about just transition as well, and sometimes they're talking about only one sector, whether it be the workers in the very specific companies that are closing, or it's what do we do about the loss of a business in a community. And you really hit the nail on the head, that it needs to be everyone from the workers in the plants themselves to the workers in the tertiary industries, whether it be the people who come in and clean, or the stop and go that virtually every worker stops at to get gas to and from work, to our communities and their loss of revenue and taxes, and then to the businesses themselves. And we need to understand what's going on with each and every one of them. That's a really good and interesting point for us to think about. Hollis, what did you think about with thinking about just transition?
Well, when I think about just transition, I think about a holistic kind of an approach, so that it's important for there to be a safety net for folks when industries turn down because of shifting sands of economies and things of that nature. There really needs to be a safety net on the part of us as a community, but that also includes our state and federal government. So when I think about our coal miners and folks that have been providing power to this country for the last 50 years, I think if the federal government steps in and has some help to offer, that we ought to be taking advantage of that help. If the state steps in and has some help to offer, I think we ought to be taking advantage of that help. I think cities and towns can maybe have things to offer as well. But those of us in the community also need to step up. I think it just takes it takes a holistic kind of an approach for there to be a just transition, and providing support for both mental health and physical health.
All right, great, Hollis. Actually, we're going to come back to that one, and I'm going to ask both of you for some specific ideas. All right, I know Clint, you're wearing your DFS hat, and so I know that, and you really can't talk from Clint's heart and soul right here. You'll talk from DFS. So actually, we're on one hand putting you in the hot seat of how will you implement these things. But I want to come back to Hollis and Lynn and follow up on Hollis acknowledging that we as a state, like virtually every other state, will be receiving and have begun to receive what's called ARPA money, right? We're going to be getting another $1 billion+ into the state from the federal government, from our tax money, right, from the federal government, in order to acknowledge, right, the negative impacts of the pandemic on our communities, which here have been exacerbated, right, in terms of our economic downturn. But we're going to be getting and have begun to receive that much money. What's the best things that we can do with it? But before we get there, Clint, all right, you heard from Lynn and Hollis, right? Some marching orders for the state. How do you think the state, and in particular DFS, can begin to implement them?
So I think Hollis and Lynn, you hit it right on the head. It really is about community and communities coming together. Communities know what they need. I think that really fits into what the Department of Family Services is doing with our Why Home Matters kind of way of thinking, because it really does look at how can we get services to that community level that the community needs. One of the things, just as an example, with our emergency rental assistance program, before rolling it out, we had numerous town hall meetings. And that was crucial because we needed to understand what really the issues were in the communities that would make this successful. People brought up ideas of, well, I own my own trailer, but I've got lot rent to pay and I can't pay my lot rent. Is that something that fits within the emergency rental assistance program? So we heard that, and it gave us an opportunity to really negotiate how the system would roll out. And how it would help community members. We heard from landlords, because the landlords are a huge piece of this. How can landlords help their tenants? So I think really bringing it back to that community level, those town hall meetings were crucial to get things going. Another example with our child care providers, using some of our federal money to help understand their needs. I think during the pandemic, we realized that childcare resources, when they weren't there, a lot of things really fell apart. But our childcare system is huge and really is important for the whole community economy to keep growing. So we've done the same thing with our childcare providers, of having those town hall meetings and trying to understand, when we do get some federal funds, what is the best use of them and how can they use it best to support their community in keeping folks at work. So yeah, completely agree. That holistic, that community approach, as Representative Connolly said earlier, and I failed to mention, there's a DFS office in every county. Every county has a district manager, and those managers can meet with those communities and listen to what the needs are and see how, as an agency, the department can help.
Yeah, thanks, Clint. That is really interesting that DFS began by acknowledging that one size doesn't fit all in Wyoming. To the extent that we can have variability in the implementation of programs that make sense. And honestly, that maybe we can do things a little bit better with this new funding than we did with the CARES funding that we got last year. And that emergency rental assistance program is one of them. Is it my understanding that you already have several $1 million worth of requests? And could you give us a little update on how that is going?
Yeah, I know we do have quite a bit that's been requested, and we're working through to get those approved and get the money out. I don't have the exact numbers of what that is now. The process, as I mentioned, it includes matching renters with landlords. So if renters and landlords have their required documentation in, we can get those expedited out within a month is the goal. So get the money back into the hands of the community members.
Great, thanks. And now going back to Lynn and Hollis. Specifics, all right. Lynn is from the Gillette area, Campbell County. Hollis is up in Sheridan. I'm down here in Laramie. All right, pie in the sky. What's best for your communities with this ARPA money that is coming in? Know that with the CARES money, again, the money that was available last time, we did a lot to bolster businesses, honestly. Lots of abilities for both large and small businesses to be able to keep their doors open, to continue to pay workers, and to keep their doors open in our communities. This time there might be a shift in emphasis to individuals, families, and communities, or at least that certainly is on the radar. How would you think about the use of that money in your communities? That could make a real difference. Lynn, what do you think?
I'm not sure how the money is appropriated. Is that the right word? I worry about, as a public land lover, and I have access to public lands that are right outside of where Eagle Butte, ITC, Dry Fork, Buckskin. I mean, you get a pretty good bird's eye view of all of that. I would like to see some of that money, or if it's Biden, this administration, coal community money to keep miners working in reclamation and do it right. I was told by a senior engineer that, well, we'll do some backfill here and we'll make a little water run here. And there's a lot to reclamation, and there's a lot of it that has not been done in years. That some of the South mines are huge and you can't see them, so I guess we'll just leave it. I don't want to be Globe, Arizona, where, you know, you have a 10 overburden faces looking at you. I just think we need to clean up our mess, and if we're going to bolster tourism, there's all kinds of ways we could keep workers in reclamation for a pretty good time period and clean up our state and do it right and take care of our water. I don't know why people aren't more worried about their water. And so I would just like to see some money immediately and start working on all the reclamation that's left behind. And
That's great.
a lot of people to work.
I'm taking notes here. All right, reclamation. All right, reclamation. Clearly, you had talked about food before. Is really important. No, down here in Albany County, boy, do we take our aquifer protection really seriously, and I think every place does. Our pristine water is second to none, I think, in the nation. How many of us can just go to the tap and basically drink a delicious glass of water with virtually nothing in it because we take such good care of it? But we better continue. All right, Hollis, what do you think?
Well, here in Sheridan, I think about basic needs. We had a food drop here just a week ago. The food group came in and had a semi-load of food, and we dispersed that food over the course of 3 hours. We had well over 200 vehicles. There's just a line of vehicles going all the way from the Golden Dome and Sheridan College all the way out to the highway. So we got a lot of folks that are food insecure in our county, and that's real concerning. We also have a serious problem with housing in Sheridan. We don't have a lot of affordable housing right now, and one of my neighbors wants to downsize. Well, he can't sell his house because there is not a smaller house for him to buy in town. So we have housing issues, we have food issues. We're fortunate enough in Sheridan County to have a free clinic for healthcare, but we're one of the few places in the state that has one of those. I know you do, Representative Connolly, down in Laramie. But people don't have access to healthcare. So when you think about stress and impacts on people's mental health, if people's basic needs aren't met, things are much more stressful for them, and their mental health suffers, which again, I hate to keep coming back to our suicide rate in this state, but we're inordinately high, and we're the highest in the country, and it ties into a lot of these different things.
Okay, so how do you each think, and Clint, you can jump in here as well, that Clint talked about how DFS did some town halls in order to understand how to best put out that rental assistance money, how to best think about child care issues in this state. How do you think that we can or should be getting information quickly about the needs in communities and how to best assist?
I'll jump in on that one. Again, I think it goes back to creating partnerships. With the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, it was a partnership between the Department of Family Services and Workforce Services. Workforce Services has a better structure to get information out into a broader base of folks than just the Department of Family Services does. So by creating that combined effort, we were able to get more information out to more people, more timely, which is essential. So those partnerships on a higher level are crucial. But then it's also reaching down into those community networks that Department of Family Services works with Climb Wyoming. So getting them the information that they need to. The other agencies or entities that we work with are, it's important to get the information out to everybody, but just building those social networks to be able to communicate. Speed is huge, but also inclusion to get everybody who needs to be included to the table and just have a conversation. Those are important.
Mm-hmm. Hollis, Lynn, ideas? Town halls, partnerships, community networks. It's my understanding that the Business Council has a website and a survey. There's the ability, especially for our businesses, small businesses, to jump in there. Other ideas? Certainly our county commissioners, city councils, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Having our locally elected officials engaged in this process and disseminating information, and I'm not saying they're not, but there's a lot of information out there that's hard for regular folks to access, and it's difficult just to know how to skin that cat. But starting with local elected officials is one of the ways to accomplish that, and to encourage them to push information out in whatever form that they find accessible and reasonable for them to do. I think that's all a good idea.
Okay. So I've got a question that's kind of at a higher level, and honestly, it gets a little bit to how Hollis has been reminding us regularly that we have the highest suicide rate in the nation, and it's due to a lot of things. But one of them is in particular a cultural mindset in Wyoming about not accessing resources. It's a myth. I mean, I call it's a cowboy myth. And if we were to go back 100 years, we'd find out a lot of dependency among those individuals in their communities. But the myth is that it's all about the individual. But because of that myth, it makes it really difficult for people to access resources, to say that you need help. Honestly, from a Lynn going to work every day of your life that you're on shift, right? And go to work, right? And expecting to do your job, your 8, 10, 12-hour shift. And then one day the gates get closed behind you, right? How do you go from that reality to go into a food bank, or to not having clothes in your budget for kids going to school the next day? So this question is about how do we change, have a mind shift that is much more pro-family as opposed to pro-individual, so that folks access the resources that are needed that will help not only their individual but our community well-being, and we know that is then our state well-being. How do we make that shift? Any ideas?
I personally, you talk to people. I'll talk to strangers, people that I think I might need to talk to. I mean, I just talk to people and I talk about mental health, and I do see a counselor, and I encourage others to seek mental health. It's just what you said about, I don't know how many minors have, they just lost their sense of identity when that happened. Like, how am I going to take care of my family? I don't, we had people leave, and because it was so embarrassing the way we were dumped and just like cast aside for 3 months. And yet some of those people, they needed money and had to go back to the same mine and the same managers. And so how do you put yourself in that mindset when you have to go back after you've been treated so poorly? That's where I had the big disconnect, and I couldn't. So I sought help through counseling and talking with my family. And yeah, it's a matter of talking to each other. We, unfortunately, there's such a great divide and misinformation out there about, if you're a Democrat, you're something like this, and if you're a Republican, I mean, I do it too. We just really need to start being neighbors and nice to people again.
Okay.
Kathy, I was reminded, when you brought this up, I was reminded about a program. I'm a Dodgers fan.
I'm sorry,
So-
we're done now. We're just going to go back to.
Look at the time.
Well, but hear me out. I mean, tune in any Dodgers game any night, and you're going to hear an announcement from the broadcasters, and it goes like this: everybody needs some help sometime. And if you feel like you need some help or you would like to talk to somebody, don't hesitate to call the Los Angeles County of Mental Health, and they run off the number. And they'll run that commercial 2 or 3 times during every Dodgers game. And then between Dodgers games, you'll see Dodgers baseball players giving the same kind of recommendation. So I think, instead of you're listening to a Wyoming football game, you'll hear political messages, you'll hear other messages, but why can't we have some messages come forth from our state Department of Health or some branch of our state government to encourage people to reach out for help? I mean, having a mental disorder is kind of like having the common cold. It's not that big a deal, and there is help available. And I didn't give a plug in my earlier presentation, so I'm going to do it quickly now. I mean, we have county mental health centers probably in every county, and they charge on a sliding scale, or they don't charge at all if you can't afford. We have a network of private providers through our counseling association and our Wyoming Psychological Association. I mean, go to the websites, get some numbers, ask somebody discreetly. I'm happy to give referral information. Everybody needs some help sometime. What's wrong with asking for some help? It's a good thing. And so I just encourage people to do that if they're in that space.
Yeah.
Thanks, Hollis. And Clint, DFS, DOH, Department of Workforce Services, do you all work together in order to provide what sometimes are called wraparound services?
I think at a community level, they do, yes. That those services, they're wraparound services, I think in every community that really is focused on individual needs of those families. What do they need? How to provide them the support? And also, an important thing too is not just providing them the support, but teaching them how to access it, how to advocate for yourself, how to, be self-sufficient and self-sustained moving forward. Those are all big pieces. So it's not just providing the help. And I want to mention real quick too, just, talking about it. Lynn, you mentioned talking about it. Hollis, with the Dodgers announcements. I think Wyoming is very unique in that we're very individualized, that the cowboy mentality. But I tell you, if somebody from outside of Wyoming criticizes the state of Wyoming, you get a whole bunch of people that'll stand up and say, no, that doesn't fly here. And that really speaks to the cohesiveness of the state. So it's not so much that individual that I think we think of as Wyoming, but really is a group. And if we can leverage that group mentality of, Wyoming, let's do it together. If you're suffering from depression, it's no different than having being diabetic. It's a chemical imbalance. That's okay. Let's work to get it resolved. If you need support in finding some food during this time of need, that's okay. That's what it's there for. As a state and as a community and as Wyomingites, I really think that we can join together and make a difference.
Yeah. You know, we don't think twice about sending our kids to public school. We don't think twice about driving on roads, right? Those are all things that our tax money has paid for. I mean, we are expected and we're grateful for it. I think the services that you just mentioned are similar, comparable. We don't always need, right, K through 12 school. But I am happy that it is in my neighborhood and that the kids in my neighborhood could use it. I am happy that we have community mental health services, and I honestly think that we should have more. But that being said, I have one last question, all right, to kind of close us out. And it is kind of going back to, and I am honestly not a person that likes that lemons to lemonade thing, because honestly, I think that we often then don't pay attention to what the real hardships are. And I think it's important for us to pay attention to those hardships. But that being said, we do have opportunities with this federal money coming in to be visionary about what our needs are in our communities. So again, what do you think, with your closing words, your closing statements, that we can think about in terms of individuals and communities, in terms of that federal money that we'll have about a year or two to be able to access and spend? What are your final thoughts? Clint, you want to start us out? We'll go
All
back
right.
this time. We'll go Clint, Hollis, and then Lynn.
So I think we've all kind of touched on this, and I think it starts with leadership. And definitely here at the Department of Family Services, I'm so happy and blessed to be able to have a director and Director Schmidt who is forward thinking, who is looking about the needs of folks beyond the typical scope. But I think that leadership also goes down into the community level. And I say that all the time. But I believe that that's a true piece. Looking at the community, the new ARPA money that comes in, if the money can be viewed and can be spent on systemic improvement and improvements that will not only affect positive change now, but will pay off dividends in years to come, I think that's crucial. And that takes the leadership of state agencies, of communities, mayors, everyone. So using that money mindfully, have a purpose that supports what needs to be supported in the communities now, but also paves way for successes for many years to come is very, very important.
Thank you. Hollis?
Well, of course, I'm a little biased in this regard, but anything we can do to bolster our mental health services in the state, if any of those monies can be used to bolster those services. I know our mental health centers are strapped because of budget cuts recently. Just for an example, we just got a suicide hotline in our state here just within the last couple of years. We don't have it up and running 24/7, but so if you call when our center isn't up and running, you get farmed out to like 6 or 7 other call centers, the closest one probably being Boys Town and Omaha. So any money that we can put towards those kinds of services in our state is going to be money very well spent, I would say. And I'll just give a plug. The suicide hotline nationally is 1-800-273-8255. Again, 1-800-273-8255. Don't hesitate to call. Everybody needs help sometime.
Thanks, Hollis. And Lynn?
I'd like to see money towards healthcare where everybody had some kind of healthcare. Fortunately, my spouse went to the markets and secured healthcare, because if what is happening in my life right now, with my spouse and her needs, and I wasn't covered, we would be in big trouble. And we were in that position when I lost my job, because we lost, your health care is tied to your job. And it was, they said it was there for a month, but I didn't believe it. And so for me, I'd like to see people have some kind of basic health care. And why can't we use that money for, so everybody has, they can take care of their families that way. And also I'd like to see an end to these food lines. I mean, like Hollis said, that's a kick, having to stand in line for food that might last you a week, depending on the size of your family. I'd like to see us address food insecurity and just start taking care of our communities and our neighbors that need it most, and quit judging. And I was really disappointed in the losing the $300 supplement. That hurt a lot of people that I know here in town, that I've made friends with through Council of Community Services and Salvation Army. And it's hard to see people struggle and know that they can't go to the doctor, and they just don't have that. And we need to start taking care of people again and use that money.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Before I hand it back to Shannon, I just noticed some questions that have come through from the public. So these will be the just quick lightning round. All right, Hollis, someone wants to know about, where does your county get funding for its clinic, and could other counties do the same?
Oh gosh, our free clinic, I wish I could tell you how that funding happens, but I haven't been that involved. So I think it would just be a matter of reaching out to the clinic folks that work there, and they'd be happy to share that information. I know Pete Gosar is the clinic director, I think, in Laramie, and I'm blocking right now on the name of our clinic director at Sheridan, but it's just a matter of calling them up and asking. They'd be happy to share that information with you.
Great, thank you. And actually, Lynn, we have a question that goes to one of your last points, was about the loss of the $300 in pandemic unemployment insurance that the governor just announced. It was his choice to remove Wyoming from that program. You talked a little bit about the negative impact that you see among kind of just your friends. Others, thoughts on the removal of Wyoming from that additional funding for the next few months?
I just don't understand it. We're such a small state. It can't, I just think it's mean-spirited. The friend that I was talking to worked at a Burger King. That Burger King closed, and that supplement has helped him get through, pay his rent and actually live. So I don't understand that mentality. And even the local paper had some opinion from the editor saying that it's un-American to get paid to stay home. Well, that's not what they're doing. And it's just so frustrating that people that have can't see the people that don't have. And we need to change that. It's like everything, healthcare costs, mental health care costs, everything goes up when we deprive people that, need a hand up now and then. It's not, it doesn't hurt the people that take it away from them.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Thanks, Lynn. Clint, a couple for you. One about SNAP. There was concern that far more individuals and families are eligible for SNAP than are using it in Wyoming. Any comments about how DFS is addressing that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of the same things we've been talking about, is getting the information out for people to know. Mm-hmm. Hopefully forums like this will provide some kind of avenue to share information. But the more people that know about it that can benefit from it, the better.
Great.
It's a huge thing.
Thank you. And thank you all. You've been so incredibly generous with your time and your knowledge, and honestly with your heart and your soul. on a really difficult topic. And so thank you very much. And I'm going to look at this. I was going to say, I'm going to turn it back to Shannon. Clearly, Shannon is the boss of all of this.
Yeah, not quite, but thank you so much to our panelists and to our moderator, Dr. Representative Kathy Connolly. We really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much to the audience. The webinar will be recorded, so if you had to step away for a little bit, you can watch the whole thing later on. Please do share it with your friends and family. We want it to be a continuing resource for our communities as we face these tough choices going forward in Wyoming. So our intention was to provide the opportunity for discussion, and we hope it generated some ideas for conversations and next steps for you all at home and amongst the panelists and our organization as well. We hope you will join us for the rest of the webinars in the series. The next one is June 8th. Entitled Resources and Opportunities of the New Economy. It'll be a great presentation explaining how some communities have transitioned and diversified and expanded to create resiliency and vibrancy in our state. So we're really looking forward to that one. And again, thank you all for your time. And with that, we are finished.